For 4 hours, I fought for the life of a 5-year-old boy. I was late to my own wedding, and 20 members of the groom's family blocked my path. Get out of here. Our son has already married someone else, they shouted. But they had no idea whose child I had just saved. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the phone shattered the silence of the residence lounge. Zenziel Vance bolted upright on the sagging sofa, her mind hazy, trying to remember where she was and why her head felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. After only 3 hours of fragmented sleep, the world outside the window was a thick ink-black Georgia night. In the hallway, the rattle of gurneys and the frantic thud of footsteps had already begun. Someone was shouting fast, "We need her now," in that specific high-pitched tone reserved only for life or death emergencies. She threw on her white coat and ran toward the emergency room. There she found the chief of surgery, Dr. Langston Brooks, standing by the nurse's station. His face bore the look of a man delivering news of a national disaster. 5-year-old boy, ruptured spleen, motor vehicle accident on the I-85 about an hour ago, Dr. Brooks said, his words coming out in clipped, hurried bursts. The trauma team is stretched thin, Zenziel. Can you handle this? She nodded without a second thought, even as a flicker of her own life flashed through her mind. The wedding, the ballroom at the Grand Regency. Her mother, who had begged her to be the flawless bride, and then there was Soraya Duclair, her future mother-in-law, with her perpetual air of disapproval. "I can do it," Zenziel said firmly. "But isn't your ceremony today?" Dr. Brooks hesitated. "I'll make it," she snapped, already sprinting toward the scrub sinks. In the hallway leading to the surgical suite, a man in a tailored, expensive suit was pacing frantically. He was a large man, but he looked utterly lost, as if the ground beneath him had turned to sand. On the gurney lay a boy so pale from blood loss that he looked like he was carved out of marble. Zenziel scanned the charts the nurses shoved into her hands as they moved. Her heart tightened. 10 more minutes of delay, and there would be nothing left to save. The surgery lasted 4 hours. For hours in which nothing existed except the surgical field, the tiny delicate vessels of a child, and the monotonous rhythmic beep of the monitors. Her back ached so intensely she wanted to double over. Her neck was slick with sweat, and by the 3rd hour, her fingers began to tremble from the sheer strain. But she didn't allow herself to think of anything but that small body on the table. She had to stitch those torn vessels millimeter by millimeter with the calculated precision she had spent years perfecting. When the anesthesiologist finally said vitals are stabilizing, Zenziel exhaled so deeply it felt as if she hadn't breathed for the entire duration. "Good work, Vance," Dr. Brooks said, clapping her on the shoulder as she pulled off her mask and gloves in the hallway. "You pulled that boy back from the brink. Now get out of here and get to your wedding." Nurse Kesha caught up with her at the lounge and handed over her phone. The screen was a chaotic mess of missed calls from unknown numbers, likely the groom's relatives who were already gathered and waiting. "At least 20 people called, honey," Kesha said, her eyes full of sympathy. "I know today is your big day. Go." "Thanks," Zenziel replied. She didn't call back. Explaining over the phone was useless, and she was out of time. She changed right there in the lounge, her fingers stiff with exhaustion. As she struggled with the buttons of her wedding dress, she fumbled with the tiny hooks on the back. The dress was simple, no massive crinolines or heavy embroidery. She had chosen it specifically so she could put it on without help, and now she was grateful for that foresight. There wasn't a minute left for makeup. She pulled her hair into a tight, sleek ponytail and wiped her face with wet wipes, trying to erase the exhaustion of 4 hours in the O. She ran to the parking lot and jumped into her old car, which mercifully cranked on the first try. Driving across Atlanta from the hospital district toward Buckhead, she mentally rehearsed her explanation for Soraya Duclair. Her future mother-in-law had always looked at her like a nuisance, a temporary glitch in her precious son's life. "Kellen will understand," Zenziel whispered to herself, weaving through the heavy Saturday traffic. "He told me he was proud of my work. He'll take my side. We've talked about this 1,000 times." She believed it so firmly that when she saw the crowd gathered at the entrance of the hotel, her first thought was, "They're waiting for me." But when Soraya Duclair stepped forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, followed by a phalanx of relatives, Kellen's older brother, Sterling, and great-auntie Odette. Zenile realized this wasn't a greeting. It was a wall. "We spent $50,000 on this venue. And where have you been gallivanting?" Soraya's voice vibrated with suppressed rage. "Do you think you're the only person who matters? Everyone is sitting in there like fools while you're out doing God knows what." "It was an emergency surgery," Zenzel said, her voice steady despite the shaking deep in her chest. "A 5-year-old boy with a ruptured spleen. He was brought in at 5 this morning. I don't give a damn about your surgeries." Soraya cut her off. "It's always an excuse with you. A shift, an operation, a dissertation that nobody asked for. You chose the wrong day to play hero. A doctor should front of all these guests. It's a disgrace to the Duclair name. How's he supposed to look people in the eye? Now, a career-obsessed woman like this isn't fit to be a wife," Auntie Odette added, her voice dripping with the peculiar satisfaction some people find in saying cruel things. "I said it from the start. Kellen, she's not the one." Zenzel felt her face flush hot. Dozens of eyes were pinned on her, each one carrying a pre-delivered sentence with no right to appeal. Years of patience, the mocking comments about her night shifts, the insinuations that a decent woman doesn't work 20 hours a day, the constant comparisons to Jasmine, who could cook a 5-course meal and never spoke out of turn. It had all been for nothing. She had hoped that her professional excellence would eventually earn their respect. She was wrong. "Where's Kellen?" Zenzel asked, her voice sounding foreign to her ears. "I want to see him. Let him tell me himself." Soraya laughed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut deeper than any insult. "My son has already exchanged rings with Jasmine. A woman who actually knows the meaning of family and respect. A woman who wouldn't abandon her husband for total strangers in a hospital." From the ballroom, she could hear the muffled sound of music, laughter, and the MC announcing toasts. A celebration was happening. Guests were cheering and her groom was standing there next to another woman. Zenzel stood frozen. The world around her lost its sharp edges, becoming a blur as if she were looking through a fogged-up window. "The papers are being signed as we speak. They'll be legally wed by next month," Sterling said, shoving his hands into his pockets with blatant contempt. "Now get out of here before we call security. Don't cause a scene." She remembered Kellen proposing to her at a restaurant overlooking the city. She remembered him on one knee, his voice trembling as he promised to protect her, promised he wouldn't let his mother interfere, promised he was proud of her career. 3 years. For 3 years, she had believed every word. And now, after 4 hours of absence, he was putting a ring on Jasmine's finger. Had Jasmine always been the backup plan? Did they force him? Or was he simply too weak to stand up to his mother as he had always been? These questions gnawed at her, but Zenzel didn't cry. She knew that if she spoke a single word, her voice would break. Suddenly, the roar of a powerful engine cut through the tension. Everyone turned. A black Rolls-Royce pulling into the hotel driveway was an event in itself, even in Buckhead. A middle-aged man in a dark charcoal suit stepped out. It was the same man Zenzel had seen pacing the hospital hallway just a few hours ago. He walked straight toward Zenzel and bowed his head in a deep, respectful gesture. It was the kind of bow one gives when words are insufficient for the gratitude felt. Caspian Sterling, he introduced himself quietly, his voice carrying the rasp of a man who hadn't slept. "You saved my son's life today. I came to thank you." The Duclair family froze, exchanging bewildered looks. In Atlanta, everyone knew the name Sterling Homes. Half of the new luxury high-rises in the city were built by his company. His face was a staple of the business news. Zenzel saw the immediate transformation in Sarah's face. Fear replaced rage. The lips that had been hurling insults just seconds ago began to tremble. "Zenzel, honey." Her mother-in-law's voice was suddenly honeyed, nauseatingly sweet. "Our dear daughter-in-law, wait a moment." Caspian Sterling swept a cold gaze over the crowd, lingering on each face as if memorizing them. "I wanted to thank the doctor in front of her family," he said firmly. I expected to find a celebration. Instead, I find this a group of people hounding a woman who 4 hours ago pulled my child back from the grave. We were just, Soraya started, but Caspian cut her off. I heard everything you said, every single word. He turned back to Zenzel. You don't have to stay here. If you wish, I can take you wherever you need to go. Zenzali looked at the ballroom where the music was still playing. She looked at the wall of people who had just told her to get out, and then at Soraya with her fake, desperate smile. This hypocrisy, the instant pivot from get out to dear daughter, was worse than any insult. It showed the true price of their respect. Zenzel, baby, come back, Soraya called out as Zenzel silently turned and walked toward the black car. Zenzel didn't answer and didn't look back. She walked with her head held high, realizing one thing. Some doors close on their own for a reason. And you shouldn't stand outside begging to be let back in. They ended up at a quiet coffee shop in a leafy neighborhood. It was nearly empty. Outside, the oak trees swayed in the breeze, and the world seemed surreal after the chaos of the morning. Caspian ordered 2 coffees, waited for the server to leave, and placed an envelope on the table. $80,000, he said simply. It's less than the value of my son's life, but please accept it as a token of my gratitude. Zenzel shook her head, not touching the envelope. I can't take that. I'm a surgeon. It's my job to save lives. If I turn this into a market, if I take money for every operation beyond my salary, my conscience becomes a commodity. And without a conscience, what kind of doctor am I? He tucked the envelope away without offense, only nodding with a respect that was clearer than any words. I wanted to thank you at your wedding in front of your people, Caspian said quietly, stirring his coffee. I found out at the hospital that today was your big day. I thought I'd say a few words so everyone would know exactly what kind of woman you are. He trailed off, waving a hand at the memory of the Duclairs. They thought you were just some ordinary resident with no one to stand up for her. Zenzali smiled bitterly, someone they could push around and replace whenever it was convenient. Caspian remained silent, offering no platitudes about how everything would be okay. That silence was better than any words. It gave her room to breathe. Is there anything else I can do? He finally asked. Take me to my mother's house in Cascade, Zenzel requested. Before the Duclairs show up there and cause a scene, they're capable of it. He nodded and called his driver. Zenzel looked out the window at the people going about their business. Students with backpacks, couples holding hands. For the first time on this endless day, she felt like she could actually draw a full breath. The man across from her asked for nothing, judged nothing, and didn't try to exploit her vulnerability. He was just there. As the car moved through the streets, Zenzel dialed her mother's number. Munsa's voice, thick with worry, answered immediately. Baby, where are you? Why haven't you been picking up? I didn't know what to think. Did you make it to the Regency? Mama. Zenzel swallowed the lump in her throat. There was an emergency surgery early this morning. A little boy. I couldn't walk away. The groom's family. They have some issues with that. I'm coming home. I'll tell you. Everything. Munsa was silent for a moment, and Zenzel heard her heavy sigh. It was the sigh of a woman who already understood everything, but knew not to push over the phone. All right, I'll be here. Don't you let anyone trample on you, you hear me? Not a soul. A person goes where they are valued, not where they are tolerated. The car stopped at the gate of a modest, well-kept bungalow on the outskirts of the city. This was the house where Zenzel had grown up, where the floors creaked in familiar patterns, and where a photo of her father still hung in the hallway. The man who had passed away from a heart attack during his shift at the plant 10 years ago. Her mother met her at the door wearing an old robe and holding a dish towel. A retired nurse and a widow, Manza had raised her daughter alone, working double shifts at the local clinic. When she saw her daughter's disheveled wedding dress and exhausted face, she didn't ask a single question. She just opened the door and ushered her into the warmth and safety of home. Munsa poured tea into a large chipped mug and set a plate of peach cobbler on the table. The cobbler she had made that morning for the celebration that didn't happen. She sat across from her daughter, her weathered hands folded on the tablecloth. Tell me everything. Zenzel told her about the 5 a.m. call, the 4 hours of surgery, The crowd at the hotel, Sarah's get out, the ring on another woman's finger, and the moment Caspian Sterling stepped out of the Rolls-Royce. Mansa listened without interrupting, her face growing pale, but her spine remained straight as an arrow. A good person reveals themselves in a crisis, Mansa said finally. And a weak one hides. Your Kellen hid behind his mama's skirt. Not everything that glitters is gold, baby. I told you to look closer at him, but you were in love and didn't want to hear it. Outside, the sound of car doors slamming and a chorus of voices erupted. Several people were arguing at once. Mansa stood up, smoothed her robe, and headed for the door like a soldier going into battle. Stay here. I'll handle this. Through the sheer curtains, Zenziel watched her mother stand on the porch with her arms crossed. At the gate stood Soraya Duclair with a forced pain smile, and behind her was Sterling's SUV. The mother-in-law was babbling something about apologies and misunderstandings about how she had always considered Zensali a daughter. This morning you told my daughter to get out. Mansa's voice was calm and steady. And now she's like a daughter to you. Your memory seems very selective. This is a family matter, Sterling cut in, trying to take charge. Zenziel is our sister-in-law. We have a right to speak to her. If there was no wedding, there is no sister-in-law. Mansa snapped. And if your Kellen already swapped rings with another woman in front of everyone, what is there to talk about? Did you value her when you were chasing her out of the parking lot? Or did you only start valuing her when you found out whose child she saved? Caspian Sterling's driver, still parked by the curb, stepped out and firmly, but politely asked the visitors to leave. Seeing a man of that stature guarding a modest house, Soraya turned even paler, realizing her plan had failed. They drove away in silence. That's that, Mansa said, coming back inside and locking the door. Live your life, baby. Those people aren't your family and never were. Zenziel hugged her mother, burying her face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of laundry detergent and home. I'm sorry, Mama. You worked so hard on all that food. What are you apologizing for? Mansa stroked her hair. You saved a child. You didn't run off to a party. Live with a clean conscience. That's all that matters. And we'll eat that cobbler ourselves. The days passed slowly in that quiet neighborhood. Zenziel took a week of medical leave and spent it with her mother making breakfast and reminding her to take her blood pressure medication. The neighbors already knew about the canceled wedding. News traveled fast through the fences and over the porches. Some offered sympathetic looks. Others watched with poorly hidden curiosity. Mansa handled them all with blunt honesty. My daughter did the right thing. She saved a life. The rest is none of your business. Zenzel's phone blew up with calls. Unknown numbers. Soraya, Sterling, distant relatives she barely knew. She blocked them one by one until Kellen's name appeared on the screen. She hesitated, then answered, Zenzila. His voice was raspy and rushed. Please listen to me. My mother had a total breakdown. The ceremony was just to calm her down. It didn't mean anything. We can fix the paperwork. I don't want to lose you. If it didn't mean anything? Zenziel interrupted, her own voice surprisingly calm. Why did you put a ring on another woman's finger in front of 100 guests? They forced me. My mother said she couldn't handle the shame. She clutched her heart. Where were you while I was operating on that child for 4 hours, Kellen? He was silent for a second. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. My mother was screaming. Jasmine showed up. You should have been at the hospital waiting outside Theo. She said just being there would have been enough. But you chose to stay home and marry someone else. I don't blame your mother, Kellen. I blame you, Zenziel. Give me a second chance. I'll change. I promise. The chance ended when you took the easy way out. She hung up and felt a strange sense of relief. Not joy, not triumph, just a hollow space where the pain used to be. One evening, as the sun was setting and the air smelled of blooming, Jasmine, Caspian Sterling arrived without his driver. He was in a simple SUV, wearing a plain shirt with the sleeves rolled up, carrying a bag of groceries, meat, vegetables, and even a box of good tea. Mansa gave him the evaluating look of an experienced woman who had seen everything and couldn't be bought with gifts. I wanted to properly introduce myself, he explained, setting the bag on the kitchen table. and to see if you needed any help around the house. I noticed the fence is leaning. I can send some men to fix it. And what are your intentions? Mansa asked point blank. Don't you try to sweet-talk me. I'm a simple woman. I like things honest. I'm not trying to buy my way in, he replied just as directly. I just think that in a hard moment, a person could use some support from the outside. No pressure, no conditions. Your daughter saved my son's life, and I witnessed her being chased away from her own wedding. That's just wrong. Mansa stayed quiet, looking at his hands, large, calloused, clearly familiar with hard work despite his wealth. You're not a show-off, she said finally, softening slightly. You seem like a man who loves his child. Fine, we'll see what kind of man you are. Later, while her mother was in the kitchen, Caspian said to Zenzel, I'm willing to wait as a friend for as long as you need. If you don't want to see me, I won't come back. Just say the word. Don't disappear, she said after a pause. I just need time. A lot of time. At the door, Mansa pulled her daughter aside. Don't rush. Don't lose your head. Money doesn't make the man. Look closely this time, or you'll get burned again. A week later, Zenzel returned to work. She put on her white coat, walked the familiar hallways, and felt like she was back where she belonged. But on her first day, Dr. Brooks called her into his office with a grim expression. A complaint has been filed, he said, not looking up from his desk. The DeClaire family. They claim you abandoned your post on your wedding day.